We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today, Dr. Thomas Schwartz of Vanderbilt University, history and political science professor there. Dr. Schwartz, normally this time of year we're talking a lot about the national Republican and Democratic conventions. This year they're all being held virtual, which is going to make them very strange. The acceptance speeches by both candidates are going to be made someplace, either from Delaware, maybe from the White House. Is it just going to be that the conventions are no longer going to have a bump? Are conventions even likely to survive after what's happened this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
It's a really interesting question. I think conventions will survive because they do have an appeal to party loyalists to gather together and be sort of supported by one another. What this does underline, though, is that the conventions themselves have very little policy or any other real implications. That they become basically simply anointments of the nominees, and that they don't have what had been in the past real issues of contention between different groups within the party. So I think they will survive in some form, but it's going to be clearly they won't have the same popular impact this year.
The biggest news awaiting the convention is who's Joe Biden going to pick as his running mate. Running mates no longer are big things to balance the ticket. They don't generally win an election for anybody, but if you make a wrong choice, you could make a bad choice. Who do you think Biden's going to pick? Is it most likely, he said it's going to be a woman, is it most likely going to be an African-American woman doing what's going on in the country, particularly in the African-American community?
Yes, I think if you forced me to wager, I'd probably wager on Kamala Harris on the idea that she is a politician who's run for president, who's gone through some of the grind, who has been somewhat screened already, and who has a relationship with the Biden family, particularly Biden's deceased son, she knew quite well. So that's my guess. Susan Rice is obviously also a competitor in that because of her strong relationship with Biden during the Obama administration. But my guess would be Kamala Harris.
In this particular case, Susan Rice that you mentioned, she did work very closely with Biden in the Obama White House, but she also had some ties with Hillary Clinton and the whole Benghazi matter. Don't you think if Biden picks her, he's sort of open game for that, and the Republicans can't wait to make that a big issue and bring up all the stuff they tried to bring up before about it?
Yes, indeed. The Republicans would bring that up. Interestingly enough, there's an article in Politico this morning that indicates Democratic progressives don't like the fact that she had investments in the pipelines out in the West that were very controversial. So she's a candidate who might cause some issues for him if he does decide to pick her.
This VP choice for Biden is more important than usual given his advanced age and the fact that he sort of indicated he might only serve one term. Is it smart for Biden to talk about only serving one term? Most presidents don't come in and do that, and that's not generally considered to be a good thing to make yourself a lame duck the day you walk into office.
That is actually right. One of the stories that I came across when I was working on my book on Henry Kissinger was how he told Gerald Ford, don't say that you're only going to serve just this short time. You'll be a dead in the duck. You won't be able to accomplish anything. And I think a one-term president immediately sets a sort of limit, and that does weaken their effectiveness with Congress.
One of the challenges for Joe Biden is what does he do about debates? The president first sort of indicated he didn't want to do any of the debates. Now he wants to do any and all debates, and he removed some of them up because of how early the vote's going to start. Should Joe Biden go ahead and do the debates? And Belmont seems to be the only one of the original ones chosen to do that. You expect the Belmont debate to happen, and this is one of the big things that will turn the election one way or the other, how they do in the debates.
Well, that's right. And, Biden has been encouraged by some of his supporters not to debate. I don't think he can really realistically dodge the debates, but I do think it's interesting how much the president now wants them, because I think it's along with any possible changes on the virus or the economy, it's one of the only things he can look to that might change the math of the election.
One thing we have not talked about, although we did talk about China earlier, what's the impact of foreign influence on we had a lot of talk about foreign influence on this election in 2016 from the Russians. Do you expect the Russians to be very active again? And will the Chinese be involved even if they become an issue in this race?
Well, it is clearly the case that foreign countries like to, especially those that are hostile to the United States, like to exacerbate our divisions. I don't foresee any direct attempt, for example, to hack into election results or something like that, that would be almost an act of war. What I do think is you may see continuing efforts to influence social media in polarizing the country, in trying to set off misinformation and trying to encourage division within the country.
In the final couple of minutes, we talked a lot about China. Is the U.S. and China going into a new Cold War? And if they are, what's the role of Russia playing in that? And how deep a Cold War are we getting into? I mean, we certainly have some tough times going on, although the president's also starting some new trade talks with China.
Yes. No, I think we are in something approximating a Cold War. It is different from the version Cold War I, you might say, with the Soviet Union, where the central emphasis was on the military competition and the nuclear arms race. This is a Cold War in which a great deal might be set around economic competition and about technological competition, particularly things like artificial intelligence. And in this case, China has very much has a number of advantages over the United States. So I think we are entering into a very difficult large power competition, great power competition, and I do think this is will be a challenge for the next president.
Very quickly, big lead for Biden right now, but you look for this race to tighten by November and perhaps be one of those photo finishes again being determined in a couple of battleground states?
Well, I'd like to say as a historian, I don't have to predict things. I write about them after they happen, and I like to keep that point. I do think in this case, one of the key things will be events. And like I said, I think if the pattern of events stays where it is now, with the virus continuing to preoccupy people, with the economy slowing down, I just can't see how President Trump can win out of that. And I could see Joe Biden winning pretty substantially.
Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for being with us. We always appreciate having you come on the show to bring us your insights and wisdom.
Thank you very much for having me on the program.
Thank you for joining us this week on Inside Politics. Hope you'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.